So we're going to be talking this morning, and we've been reading in the story about a man named Joseph. Do you guys remember Joseph? We've been talking about Joseph. What's something that happened to Joseph? You guys can have a seat right over here. Thank you. Yes. What's something that happened to Joseph? Let's pick one. Right. The last time we talked about it. Yep. Well, last time, yep, he became a very important man in Egypt. Today we're going to talk about the brothers coming down and talking to him. That's because Joseph had he was taken from his brothers, and they put him into a pit, right? And then they sold him into slavery. And then he got into trouble when he was a slave, and so he went into prison. But then he was able to interpret this great dream, right, that the Pharaoh had. Do you guys remember the dream that the Pharaoh had of the big, nice, beautiful cows that then came up and ate that were there, and then there was really ugly, gaunt cows that were skinny and nasty, and they ate the really beautiful ones? Remember? And Joseph interpreted this dream for Pharaoh, and he actually let him know that there's going to be a huge famine in the land. And remember, we talked about a famine as being when you don't have any food anywhere. What happens when you don't have any food? Yeah? You get really hungry. That's one thing. What happens if you get really hungry and that lasts for a really, really long time? You die. That's right. So a famine's a pretty serious thing. And Joseph was really, really connected to the Lord. He had a good relationship with the Lord, and the Lord helped him to know that in Egypt there was going to be a famine, meaning there was going to be no food after 7 years. So he made this plan to collect a little bit each time, right? So that after the good time when we had lots of food growing, we'd have some saved up for later when they didn't have very much, right? So our story today comes after that, and all of his brothers, remember the last time they were with Joseph, they were not nice to him. They were pretty nasty because they didn't like him. They sold him into slavery, right? Now the brothers don't have any food either, but Joseph has food. So where do you think the brothers are going to come? To Joseph, right? And we're going to talk about something really interesting in this story. Now, if you were Joseph, how would you feel about your brothers coming back to you after they were mean? They put you into a pit. They talked about killing you, and then they sold you into slavery. What do you think, Joseph? How did he feel? If you were Joseph, how would you feel? If you were Joseph, he said, I would mess with them hardcore, right? That's some of our thoughts. We think, if they did something mean to us, then we should do something mean back, right? Sometimes that's the way we think, yeah? You want to tell me afterwards? Thank you. All right, so one thing that happens right at the beginning, when the brothers come down, what do you think he first does? He cries. He cries. He weeps. What do you guys cry about? What do we cry about? What are some different things that we cry about? Yeah, why do you cry? Oh, when mom and dad yell, sometimes that happens, right? And we aren't, and we're afraid and a little sad, and maybe we're guilty of something and we feel bad. So we might cry when we feel bad like that, yeah? Other reasons why we might cry? Not getting something we want, we might cry because, oh, I wanted this and I didn't get it. Yeah? When things happen, when fighting happens, it makes us cry, right? And how about when you're really happy? Do you cry when, like, a new baby is born? I'll tell you a secret. I do. Anybody else cry when little babies are born, or when Maybe when two people love each other and they get married, does that make us cry? When you see people at weddings, if you look into the crowds of people, you'll see a lot of people with tears, but we were talking about crying because we're sad. Why would people cry when they're happy? They're happy tears, right? That's right. So we have lots of different ways of crying. And so in our story, what happens is the brothers come down, and Joseph does weep, and he weeps 4 different times. And they're very different ways of crying. The first time, I think he's thinking exactly like you were saying, Julian. He was kind of going, these guys were mean to me. These guys were mean, so mean, and it makes us sad when somebody else is so mean to us, it can make us cry. We're going to just read that little portion here. We're going to read each time in this story, and we'll tell the little bit of the story as we go about when they cried. So this is Genesis chapter 42, verse 18. It says, then Joseph said to them the 3rd day, so they had been there a couple of days. Now remember, they don't know, the brothers don't know that Joseph knows who they are. He says, do this and live, for I fear God. If you are honest men, let one of your brothers be confined to your prison house, but you go and carry grain for the famine of your houses, and bring your youngest brother to me, so your words will be verified, and you shall not die. And they did so. When they said to one another, we are truly guilty concerning our brother, for we saw the anguish of his soul when he pleaded with us, and we would not hear. Therefore the distress has come upon us. And Reuben answered them, saying, did I not speak to you, saying, do not sin against the boy? And you would not listen. Therefore, behold, his blood is now required of us. But they did not know that Joseph understood them, for he spoke to them through an interpreter. So he was speaking a different language than the other brothers, and they didn't know that he could understand them. But here's what happened. It says, and he turned himself away from them and wept. Then he returned to them again and talked with them, and he took Simeon from them and bound them before their eyes. Why do you think Joseph was weeping here? Now Reuben, they were all remembering, do you remember when we were mean to our little brother and we put him into the pit? They were remembering this and they were going, oh no, now we're getting in trouble for the things that we did to Joseph. But they didn't know that Joseph was hearing them feel these feelings of guilt, right? So Joseph was actually crying because he was almost happy that they recognized that they caused him pain. So there's lots of reasons to cry. This is what we're talking about today, is how weeping is something that is a very important emotion, something that the Lord actually helps us to feel at times, because it's an expression of love in many ways. We're going to look at the next time he cried. So Joseph then takes the people, or tells them to go back home and to bring their little brother Benjamin. And so then they come back, and we're going to look at Genesis chapter 43. In verse 29, it says, then he lifted his eyes, this is Joseph, and saw his brother Benjamin, his mother's son, and said, is this your younger brother of whom you spoke to me? And he said, God be gracious to you, my son. Now his heart yearned for his brother, so Joseph made haste and sought somewhere to weep. And he went into his chamber, and he wept there. And he washed his face and came out, and he restrained himself, and he told them to serve the bread. So we have Joseph crying again. Why is Joseph crying this time? Yeah? Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we're going to focus on the first one you said, which is that he was happy that his brother, that he hadn't seen in so long, he might not have even really known he had this little brother, and he gets to meet his little brother. How long have you guys been away from a family member that you love? Like maybe you can think of a grandparent that you don't see very often, or an aunt or an uncle that you don't see very often, and you get to see them and it's so fun, it's so exciting, you love them. This is what Joseph was feeling. He was so happy to see his little brother. So these are tears of joy. I'm going to look at one more time. So Joseph still hasn't told his brothers that he was his brother. They didn't know. They didn't know that he was there. So he brings them all in. He finally decides he's going to let them know. And in chapter 45 of Genesis, it says this. It says, "Then Joseph could not restrain himself before all those who stood by him, and he cried out, 'Make sure everyone go out from me.' So no one stood with him while Joseph made himself known to his brothers. And he wept out loud. And the Egyptians of the house of Pharaoh heard it. Then Joseph said to his brothers, 'I am Joseph. Does my father still live?' But his brothers could not answer him, for they were dismayed at his presence. And Joseph said to his brothers, 'Please come near to me.' So they came near. Then he said, 'I am your brother Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt.'" Remember how he might have been upset before about this? Now listen to what he says. "But now do not therefore be grieved or angry with yourselves because you sold me into here, for God sent me before you to preserve life." So does Joseph sound angry now? No. Why wouldn't he be angry? Yeah? Yeah. Because they were being good now. They had recognized the problems that they were being good brothers now. And so Joseph was really happy about this, and he's saying, it's okay. Have you ever forgiven somebody for something they did to you? Like maybe your little brother or sister, maybe you hit each other, one of that. Like did somebody hit you and maybe you had to go, "It's okay, I'm going to forgive you." Do we do that sometimes? That's what we're supposed to do, is forgive. Now Joseph, the reason why he forgives is because he loves them so much. He doesn't want to hold grudges. And so later on it says that he then fell on his brother Benjamin's neck and wept. And Benjamin wept on his neck. Moreover, he kissed all of his brothers and wept over them. And after that, his brothers talked with him. So there's a lot of weeping in this story, isn't there? Isn't this an important emotion that we have? Sometimes we feel like, I don't want to be seen crying, right? And you see Joseph does that once. He turns his face so they don't see him crying. And one time he left the whole room so they don't see him crying. Sometimes that's a feeling that we have, is we're afraid to cry because maybe we feel embarrassed or upset. But this isn't an emotion to be afraid of. It's actually a very important one that the Lord gives us, because weeping or crying shows us there's something inside that's very important to us, something that we love. So when we cry when we're hurt, that's because we love feeling good and we don't like feeling bad, right? But when we cry when we're happy, it's because our love is being filled with joy and happiness. Like when we get to be together with our family, like in our story here. They hadn't seen each other for so long and they're reunited. That's why people cry when they're at weddings or when somebody is born, because these are happy things. The Lord wants us to feel that emotion, and it's a good thing, right? So something I want us to think about today is that when we do when we do cry, we might think about what are these tears from? Why am I upset, or why am I sad, or maybe why am I really happy? Okay? Now please bow for a blessing on the children. The Lord bless your going out and your coming in from this time forth and even forevermore. Amen.